To be here. We have a few announcements as we begin. There is on the calendar, mark the calendar for the ladies, September 30th. It was a Tuesday night for the ladies eat out. And then take note of a thank you card on the bulletin board at the back by the door from Lee after his recent surgery. We do have our Hogback mission trip scheduled for October 9th through 13th. See Clint Smith for details about that. And then a couple of things in the bulletin, updates on some conditions. Lisa Klein's mother, Nita, has been placed in hospice care. Remember the Klein family for that. Karen Schreiner has been hospitalized recently and hasn't been able to attend services on Sunday mornings here the last few weeks, so we want to remember Karen. Mike Bruns had his back surgery on Monday, and I texted with him yesterday, and they were getting him up and walking around. I don't know if he's home yet, or you know if I don't know when he's scheduled to go home, but hopefully that'll be soon. He was doing well when I was texting with him yesterday. And then I want to remember our memory verse coming up. So we get an extra week because there's 2 verses for this memory verse. So Romans 10, verses 9 and 10, that if you confess with your mouth Jesus as Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. For with the heart man believes, resulting in righteousness, and with the mouth he confesses, resulting in salvation. Do we need any other announcements this evening? Oh, Randy. Oh, the basement. You're right. Okay, so the carpets are getting cleaned tomorrow in the basement, so we need to move some stuff off the carpets. So anyone that can stay and help move some furniture and things in the basement after services tonight. And then Saturday morning, we need to move it all back. So like 8 o'clock Saturday morning or so, Randy said. So anyone that can help either of those 2 times would be appreciated. And then if you're here anyway and you've been moving stuff, we might as well go help Justin Porter with some stuff at his yard on Saturday after that was the announcement. So there's a couple of service opportunities for us there. Any other thoughts for tonight? Okay.
I thought 523 would be appropriate. I know the Lord will find a way through 523. No, the Lord will find a way for me. I know the Lord will find a way for me. If I walk in heaven's light, shun the wrong and do the right, I know the Lord will find a way for me. The Lord has said, go preach the word to all the world. The Lord has said, go preach the word to all the world. If I walk in heaven's light, shun the wrong and do the right, I know the Lord will find a way for me. Won't it be grand to hear him say, well done? Won't it be grand to hear him say, well done? If I walk in heaven's light, shun the wrong and do the right, won't it be grand to hear him say, well done?
Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to gather again together tonight, Lord, to fellowship together, to study your word. Lord, we ask that you be with those who are able to be with us this evening. Know if there's many who are experiencing illnesses, receiving treatments for those illnesses, Lord. We ask that you guide their doctors, and those that are taking care of them, they'll get the care that they need to return to us. Lord, we ask that you be with everyone. There's been an awful lot that's gone on the past week or so. It has to do with the family Charlie Kirk, comfort them in this time of loss. Lord, we know it says in Romans that all things work for the good of those who love you. And we trust that that promise is true in this situation. Lord, I ask you to be with us as we go about our weeks, as we do our work, and turn us safely here. Worship you on Sunday. That's the same thing as Sunday. Amen.
Well, good evening. You're not Sam. Sam texted me a little while ago, and he was feeling under the weather, not going to make it tonight. So just got a little switch there. Just flip that over. There we go.
Yep, not Sam.
There you go. And I just kind of said, hey, Mike, Sam's not going to be here tonight. You want to come sit by me? He said, sure. Okay. So awesome. So that's great. Thanks for coming up.
Glad to join you.
And we'll see
work.
how it goes. We feel free to just jump in any old time. You want to do the reading and all, kind of like you just want to do that? All right.
Sure.
Okay. So quick recap. We started Judges chapter 11 last night. You got to keep me on track. Catch my mistakes.
Last week.
Last week. Thank you. And see there? This is already working great. Last week we started Judges chapter 11. We got into kind of the scenario we noticed in Judges chapter 10. We had a couple of real short mentions of some judges, and then talked about the process leading up to Jephthah, sort of assuming the leadership of the region of Gilead, where he was from, and how he had been kind of exiled from that area because he was from an illegitimate relationship, and then so they exiled him, they sent him away, and they would not accept him. And then when they needed a military leader, turns out Jephthah was pretty adept at that. He was a valiant warrior, and so now we're gathered for war against the nation that is oppressing us, the Ammonites. But we don't have a leader, and we've kind of trusted in God through this cycle of things that we've seen, for God to appoint a judge and a leader to lead us in these military matters, and now we're looking for somebody, so we're asking Jephthah. And Jephthah agrees, but sort of provisionally. He's basically to the point of, if God blesses this, then you need to accept that he has kind of put his stamp of approval on me as your leader, and you need to accept that I then would be the leader of your people. So he kind of puts that stipulation on stepping into this role. So we made it through verse 11 last week in Judges chapter 11, and we will pick up then with Judges chapter 11, verses 12 through 17. Chapter 11, verse 12 is really where it starts to get into some of the Jephthah assumes the mantle of leadership, and he's going to start making some decisions and doing some things in negotiations with the other kings around the area, and he's going to start asserting some of his authority and defending the people. Okay.
This is where I start?
This is where you start, 12 through 17.
Okay. Judges 11, 12 through 17. Now Jephthah sent messengers to the king of the sons of Ammon, saying, "What is between you and me, that we have come to me to fight against my land?" The king of the sons of Ammon said to the messengers of Jephthah, "Because Israel took away my land when they came up from Egypt, from the Arnon, as far as Jabbok and the Jordan. Therefore return them peaceably now." But Jephthah sent messengers again to the king of the sons of Ammon, and they said to him, "Thus says Jephthah, Israel did not take away the land of Moab, nor the lands of the sons of Ammon. For when we came up from Egypt, and Israel went through the wilderness to the Red Sea, and came to Kadesh, Then Israel sent messengers to the king of Edom, saying, "Please let us pass through your land." But the king of Edom would not listen. And they also sent the king of Moab, but he would not consent. So Israel remained at Kadesh.
All right, so I always like throwing some maps on there so we kind of know the areas that we're talking about. Gilead is this area up here, and then Ammon is just right up against it. Ammon is just to the east of Gilead. Ammon believes that land is their ancestral land. Probably was to some degree their ancestral land, and they want to reclaim that land from a long time in the past. We'll talk later about how much time has transpired from the time that the children of Israel passed through that area, and Ammon is referring back. It's not something that just happened a few years ago. It's something that happened way back in the past. And so he mentions Kadesh, and that's way down here in the bottom. This is where the children of Israel camped when they sent out the 12 spies. And did we talk about this last week a little bit maybe? I can't remember. When they sent out the 12 spies and the 10 spies brought back the bad report and said we shouldn't enter the land, and it was at Kadesh where God said, okay, well now you don't get to enter the land. And so they were not allowed that opportunity. So from that point on, instead of going up into the promised land, which would have just been a straight shot up here, God leads them out into the wilderness where they wander around for 40 years, and that puts them in proximity of the land of Ammon. That's why this conflict ends up taking place between the children of Israel and Ammon that leads to this taking place hundreds of years later. So that's kind of where we're at. There's just a couple of maps that kind of show those different relationships to those areas so that you can kind of get a picture of where they're at. And so the king of Ammon, this is old wounds reopened. We're going back in time here. And so, there's, even if through generations past, if there's ever been a friendly relationship between the Israelites and the Ammonites, like they've been able to be trade partners or they've been able to live side by side with one another and kind of coexist in this area, nothing can ruin that relationship faster than bringing up old hurts. And if you've ever, been in a relationship where, sometime along the way that has happened, where things are going well and then whoever in that relationship brings that, you remember that time you hurt my feelings 20 years ago, and then those old hurts are reopened and you have to relive that whole conversation or that whole episode again. That's kind of what's happening here. But really it's a pretense of righteous indignation. Ammon wants this land. They want to boot the Israelites out. They want the produce of the land, and so they're manufacturing a reason to start a conflict, to start a war with the children of Israel. It's under the pretense of sounding like we have a righteous complaint against you, but once we get back into the historical documents and we read the account of what really happened, we're going to see that this really is not a righteous reason for the people to do this at all anyway. And we've got some scriptural references we can look at that kind of back that idea up of this not being a righteous thing. Remember last week we said this is all documented. If we go back into the books of Numbers and Deuteronomy, we can see that this is that the Ammonites' remembrance of these things is not the way that God records those things of having happened. Back in Deuteronomy 2:9, God specifically forbid the children of Israel from taking land from the Moabites as they made their way through to the promised land. This is not the promised land. Don't take this land. We don't. This is not where I'm taking you. I'm not taking you to the land of the Moabites. So leave that land alone. So they're to pass through that land. Deuteronomy 2:19 specifically says, don't take land from Ammon. This is not the promised land. This is not where I'm taking you. If you take this land and settle here, you're not getting my promise that I've made to you of where I'm supposed to take you. Numbers 20, verses 14 through 21, the Israelites during that time make a request to pass through the land of Edom. The Edomites deny that request, don't allow them to pass through. They promise even that we'll stay on the highway, and if our cattle eat anything, if we trample any grass, we'll pay for it. We'll make restitution for it. And the Edomites deny that request, so they were not even allowed to pass through that area to begin with. Again, later in Deuteronomy chapter 2, the request to pass through King Sihon's lands, which is specifically mentioned during this exchange with Jephthah and the king of Ammon, that was denied. And then in Deuteronomy 2, verses 8 and 9, it specifically says that Israel skirted past Edom and Moab. They went around Edom and Moab and did not enter into their territory. So all of these things historically Israel did what God commanded them to do. They didn't take stuff that wasn't theirs. They didn't try to assume a settlement during that 40 years of wandering. Chuck.
You know, that he sent messengers, and he's trying for, it appears that he's trying for a peaceful solution, you know, here, and he's making the steps to try to resolve it peacefully.
Yeah, I mean, he's being a diplomat first. Even though we began this story by saying, if you go back into chapter 10, verses 17 and 18, they basically they gather together and camp at Mizpah. They're gathered for war to go to battle against the Ammonites, although they don't have a leader. And then they get Jephthah as their leader, and his first step is to try to negotiate, to try to settle things before they go to battle. So he is not, a warmonger. He's not looking for a fight, as it seems the Ammonites are. The Ammonites are digging up old conflicts, and mischaracterizing those conflicts to try to give a pretense to go to war. You got
It's usually
anything to
where
add to that?
Sam chimes in.
This is
but-
where Sam chimes in. So, yeah, so he makes reference back to the back in chapter 10, verse 8, that there was 18 years of conflict. 10:18 there. 10:8, which 10:8 does not say 18 years.
Yeah.
Does it?
Yep.
Oh, I was in 10:10. Sorry, math teacher couldn't read the numbers. Verse 8, that for 18 years they afflicted all the sons of Israel who were beyond the Jordan and Gilead in the land of the Amorites. So there you go. The Ammonites are afflicting the Israelites in their own land. The land of the Amorites is actually part of the Canaanite, land of Canaan, the promised land. The Ammonites and the Amorites are two different people. The Amorites were Canaanite people that were settled in the promised land, one of the tribes of the land of Canaan, versus the Ammonites, who had their own land and were descendants of Lot from the time of Abraham. So they look similar, but they're not the same people. And then Jephthah begins laying out his case for why this is an unrighteous conflict. You shouldn't be attacking us. You shouldn't be doing these things to us. We should find a way to live together, and we'll see how that goes. Kadesh was mentioned already. The spies were sent out from there. Miriam also died there in Numbers chapter 20. That's where Moses struck the rock and was barred entry into the promised land in Numbers chapter 20 as well. God commanded him to speak to the rock, and instead he struck the rock. That happened at Kadesh. So lots of important things happened at Kadesh, and that was the beginning of the period of wandering when Ammon now is raising a ruckus over what happened beginning there. All right, Mr. Gregg.
Nothing new under the sun. They just wanted that land.
Sure.
They were making up a story.
Yeah.
And doesn't that sound like today?
Yeah.
We've got Ukraine being attacked, but just, making up a story about how, well, that's our ancestral
Yeah.
land.
And there's fighting in this region today that goes back, even as far as this, that people claiming, laying claim to land that's been in their family or tribal possession for thousands of years. And so, so this battle right here is still going on, even today. So it's interesting to put that in the perspective of this being 1,200 years before Christ, and they're fighting over this land. And what are they doing there in this land today? They're still fighting over it. So there you go. All right, verses 18 to 24.
Okay, verse 18. Then they went through the wilderness and around the land of Edom and the land of Moab, and came to the east side of the land of Moab, and they camped beyond the Arnon, but they did not enter the territory of Moab, for the Arnon was the border of Moab. And Israel sent messengers to Sihon, the king of the Amorites, and the king of Heshbon, and Israel said to him, "Please let us pass through your land to our place." But Sihon did not trust Israel to pass through his territory, so Sihon gathered all his people and camped at Jahaz, and they fought with Israel. The Lord, the God of Israel, gave Sihon and all of his people into the hand of Israel, and they defeated them. So Israel possessed all the land of the Amorites and the inhabitants of the country. So they possessed all the territory of the Amorites from the Arnon as far as Jabbok, and from the wilderness as far as the Jordan. Since now the Lord, the God of Israel, drove out the Amorites from before his people Israel, are you then to possess it? Do you not possess what Chemosh, your God, gives you to possess? So whatever the Lord our God has driven out before us, we will possess it.
All right, so this is Jephthah's response to Ammon's claims on the land. And we've kind of already looked at, and there's even more references here. Numbers chapter 21, verse 4 specifically says they journeyed around Edom. They didn't go through Edom. Ammon is making the claim, you came through Edom and trampled all over our land and took some of it. And now we want it back. And the historical record shows we didn't. We went around Edom. We didn't take land that God did not give us at that time. And then Deuteronomy chapter 2, verses 1 through 9, they went around Edom and Moab as commanded by God. Numbers 21, 24 details that request to Sihon that Japheth makes mention of. Japheth knew his scriptures. He knew the stories from the scrolls about what had happened. And so he's making reference back to these various, what we would call Old Testament scriptures. For him, they were just scriptures. They were contemporary scriptures for him. And he's making reference back to those things and retelling those stories as they're recorded in God's Word. So the request to Sihon was there. Sihon refuses. And then, as they are instructed, they go to battle against Sihon. If he's not going to assist God's people, then God is going to enforce his will or impose his will upon Sihon. And the victory of that is recorded there in Numbers 21 and in Deuteronomy chapter 2. So Deuteronomy 2 and Numbers 21, I think we mentioned those last week a couple times as being important references for us to look back at while we read through Judges chapter 11. I love ultimately what Japheth kind of lays down before the Ammonites is this. Look, our God gave us this land, so we'll claim it. And why don't you guys claim whatever land your God Chemosh gives you? And if the battle is between God and Chemosh, I like our chances, right? I like our odds. And Japheth is demonstrating his faith in God's sovereignty, in his faith in God's justice, his faith in God's ability to stand by what he has promised to the children of Israel. All of those things as he lays out this reasoning to the Ammonite king through his messengers, and I like that setup, that battle. It's really not between you and me; it's between God and Chemosh. Let's see who comes out on top. So Japheth sets that up really well there. You want to take that?
Yeah, just skipping down in Sam's notes here to that reference back to Deuteronomy 2:19. So who gave the Ammonites their land? And in reading that verse, Israelites were instructed not to possess that land. That was not part of their promise. And in fact, referenced back to that being given to the descendants of Lot.
Yeah. So God had already apportioned that land at that time to be land for the descendants of Lot. And so God remembered that promise, and he didn't forego that promise in order to supplant the children of Ammon at that time. So the true aggressors here are the Ammonites. They're the ones that have picked this fight. They're the ones that are standing upon centuries-old information and kind of trying to go back in time to the point that they can reclaim something that hasn't been theirs for multiplied generations. And I think we'll see that number specified in our next reading of how long it's been since these old battles have been fought, and now he's trying to reopen those old wounds. I just love the way that Japheth structures his responses here, centering them around the scriptural record of what actually happened. And while the Ammonite king is making it personal, you've taken our stuff and we don't like you because of that, Japheth is keeping it factual. This is what happened. This is the historical record. And we're gonna stick with what history is determined is gonna be the outcome here. So Japheth, to his credit, is not making this a personal battle between him and the king of the Ammonites. He is keeping it according to the record. Any other thoughts on this section? All right.
Okay. Pick it up in verse 25. Now, are you any better than Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab? Did he ever strive with Israel, or did he ever fight against them? While Israel lived in Heshbon and its villages, and Aroer, and its villages, and in all the cities or the banks of Arnon, 300 years. Why did you not recover them within that time? I therefore have not sinned against you, but you are doing me wrong by making war against me. May the Lord, the judge today between the sons of Israel and the sons of Ammon. But the king of the sons of Ammon disregarded the message which Jephthah had sent to them.
All right, I'm going to go back to one of those maps here real quick because I didn't put, there it is. Whoops, too far. So he keeps talking about the Arnon and the Jabbok. Arnon and Jabbok are two different rivers that are the borders of some of these lands. So let's see. The Arnon is this river down here that was the border of Edom and Moab, I believe, unless it was that one. There's a river. There's a river. I thought they were marked on this map. Are they marked on this map?
I can't tell.
One of the maps I had showed, maybe I've got the wrong map. Arnon, I think, was the border of Moab, is what he said. I think this one is the Arnon that was the border between Moab and Ammon. And then up here, I think, was the Jabbok, which is closer to where they crossed the Jordan. Well, it's further north of the Jordan, but anyway, there's rivers that are Arnon and Jabbok. I thought they were labeled.
Yep, it's the lowest.
The lowest one is the Arnon?
Yep.
Okay, the lowest one is the Arnon. Okay, so the Arnon was the border between Edom and Moab, and then maybe this one was the Jabbok that was the northern.
Oh, hold up. No, I'm looking. Here, so Edom. and right
Aroer.
above. So it's-
Arnon. Okay, Arnon and Aroer is right here. This one is Arnon, and the city of Aroer is over here. And then Jabbok, I think, is up here. Okay, so, but anyway, it's a couple of rivers. See the importance of having like reliable maps, and I thought I had maps that had those names on them, but it's on this map. You can see that, Chuck? Up here? Oh, look at there, Jabbok. See there? That's why I put that map on here, for that reason right there. Okay, good eyes. Good job. And the Arnon is down here. That's why I put a second map, because this one didn't show Arnon. Arnon is over here, midway on the Dead Sea. Okay, so
go.
between the two maps, we got them both. Now you know where the Arnon and the Jabbok are. There will be a test. All right, so Arnon, well, it's something to do. I'm not sure what. I'll find a way. We'll get there. All right, where were we? Okay, sorry about that. He keeps mentioning those words, Arnon and Jabbok, and it's like, if you don't know, you don't know. I mean, those words are meaningless to us. It'd be like if we were talking about Cow Creek to somebody that was from, 10 Timbuktu, they wouldn't know what Cow Creek was. We'd have to tell them, or the Smoky Hill, or the Little Arkansas, or something like that. So we'd have to get out a map and show them, or Dry Turkey Creek, which has not been dry at all this summer. All right, so, oops, I went way too far here. Backing up. Okay, so this is the section we just read, where he references some people. So, how long is too long to carry a grudge? I mean, at least 300 years is okay, because it's been 300 years since this happened. For 300 years, and it's almost like, do you know what happened 300 years ago? I don't know much of what happened 300 years ago, but evidently the king of Ammon, either they had got a really robust history system in their schools where they teach like really good history and they know that history going back 300 years, or he's been reading some old history books and he comes across a story about the Israelites coming through and taking some of their land, and he said, they did what? And now he's ready to go to war over something that he may not have even known about last week. That he just, like, all of a sudden he became aware of this because he was reading an old history book or something. I mean, all of that is speculation, but how do we know that this was our ancestral land 300 years ago? It seems to me, they didn't have Google. They couldn't have looked it up online. How long has this been part of their national psyche that they hate the Israelites because they took our land away from us all those many years ago? It seems like, it just seems like a long time to carry a grudge.
It does.
So I don't, let that be a lesson to us. If you're carrying a grudge around, don't wait 300 years to take care of it. Work that out with people. And then beware the motives of those whose mantra is, it's not fair. They come up with it for 300 years, they've been carrying this grudge, and now they want to say, well, we're going to come take our land back from it because it's not fair. You took it. And anytime, who decides what's fair? I mean, who makes the decision of, well, to us it seems fair. I mean, it's our land. We've been living on it for 300 years. And so the idea of wanting to fight a battle over, this just isn't fair, really is a quick way to start a war, start a battle, it seems like, just to destroy a relationship. Not that they maybe had a very good relationship to begin with, but it just seems like that's what the Ammonites are saying here. So God will judge what is right, regardless of our understanding of what is fair. And Jephthah is willing to take that stand and put his faith in his God, and he encourages, the Ammonites to do the same. And then not even Balak was bold enough to launch an attack at the time that the events took place. So the Ammonites are referring back to all these things that happened and say, well, now we're going to come attack you because we don't feel like justice was served 300 years ago. But Balak was there in the moment, and in the moment he called off the war. He had his people ready to attack, but in the moment he didn't do it because it wasn't the right thing to do and it wasn't going to be a winning proposition. So if 300 years ago they weren't willing to fight this battle, why are you trying to fight it now? It doesn't make sense.
So I got a question.
Yeah.
Just looking at Sam's notes here. So Jephthah completely refutes the claim that these people have. And then thinking back to when we started in chapter 11, first couple of verses, he was driven out by his people for reasons and spent some time kind of on his own or with, how they refer to it, unsavory characters, something along those lines. So would it have been typical for him to be this learned in this time? Or how would we explain that?
So
'cause he seems to have a pretty good grasp on his people's
He does,
history.
and I think there was probably some sort of I don't know that we would point to every generation of people. I mean, obviously not every generation of people in Israel's history was well educated in scriptural knowledge, because we had a generation, the generation after Joshua is good, but then the generation after them, they didn't know who God was. So there were times when they didn't do a particularly good job of teaching their children the stories and all those things. But there was an emphasis given to them in the Mosaic Law of making sure that their children knew the Scriptures. And that goes back to Deuteronomy 6. Deuteronomy 6 verses 4 through 9, if you're gonna choose a block of Scripture that is, and rank them in importance to the Israelite people, Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9 has to rank up in the top couple, if not their very most important one, when it says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and these words which I'm commanding you today, you shall teach them diligently to your sons. And so the emphasis was on the structure of Jewish society to be built around teaching the next generation. And so even though Jephthah, you think about who he was basically fatherless because he was the son of a prostitute and he was driven away from his people. And so his father would have had no claim to him. But somewhere along the way, somebody taught him the Scriptures. And whether that was a faithful mother or a faithful uncle or part of a community system where he was able to be part of a community that learned the Scriptures or whatever it was, we're just not told. But there was supposed to be a structure in place by which the children learned the Scriptures. And we see that played out at various times during the nation of Israel. We see it played out with Jesus, when Jesus at age 12, and he was unique, but Jesus at age 12 was reasoning with adults in the temple because he knew the Scriptures so well. And we see there's evidence of what we would think of as like parochial schools, or the tradition was for Jewish boys to be educated up through a certain age, 8 or 10 or 12 maybe. And then if they showed a particular aptitude for the Scriptures, they would then apprentice with a rabbi and they would go further. But if they were not particularly adept at the Scriptures, then they would enter a trade at that time, which is probably how Jephthah became a warrior. But he still had that early training as a young man as a basis or a foundation. So without knowing, Jephthah's particular history, we have to kind of speculate about what structure he grew up under, but that structure was supposed to be there to teach them. I mean, that's the way God wanted it. Deuteronomy chapter 20, there's a couple of times, or Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 20, specifically says, when your son asks you in times to come, what do the testimonies and statutes and judgments mean, which the Lord commanded you? So there was, not only do we look for opportunities to teach, but we also have things built into our society to raise questions. They erected these memorials, the 12 stones when they crossed the Jordan River, and they had different monuments and things built. They had the tabernacle at Shiloh. They had all of these things built within their society that were supposed to spur the questions from one generation to the next that would lead to the telling of their story. Chuck.
The first part of chapter 11, when it's talking about Jephthah, being the son of a harlot, but it talks about when the sons grew up, they drove Jephthah out. So it makes you wonder if Jephthah didn't live in the same house as the others, and if that's so, then he would have probably got some training
Yeah.
on that aspect,
Yeah.
from a Jewish father or a Hebrew
Yep.
father.
And it could be, it seems from that reading, that maybe Gilead was the oldest, that he was the son of a prostitute, and then his father later was married and began having his, I don't like the word, but legitimate family. And then as those sons got older, they knew the oldest son was the son of a prostitute, not the son of their mother. And so that's when they drove him out. So he may have been the oldest that received that early training before he was driven out. Maybe the younger brothers should have received some of that training too. But
I think it's interesting how often the Sihon fellow is mentioned, like later on.
okay,
Even in, well, this is different, but the Song of Deborah, Barak's there, there's certain history, you're right, that they pick up, but the Sihon and Og, that whole conflict seems to be a burr under their saddle or whatever, because they mention it a lot throughout the history, like, we couldn't go through their land, they wouldn't let us pass through their land.
yeah.
Comes up like Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges.
So yeah, I mean, so it does seem to be a kind of a sticking point or a burr under their saddle, like you said, so that they remember back to these specific things when they were slighted as a nation. So it asks, I mean, how long have the Israelites held a grudge against, but they got the land, so they're a little more content. But it's all, I love the tiebacks to the history. I so often, and even with this, we've speculated about some things, but I love it when we can make these connections back where we don't have to speculate about the history behind this because we have it recorded so well in Numbers and Deuteronomy. And so we can see those connections and how they are affecting things even hundreds of years later. All right, next section.
All right, verse 29. Now the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah, so he passed through Gilead and Manasseh. Then he passed through Mitzvah and Gilead. And from Mitzvah of Gilead, he went on to the sons of Ammon. Jephthah made a vow to the Lord and said, "If you will indeed give the sons of Ammon into my hand, then it shall be that whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the sons of Ammon, it shall be the Lord's. And when I will offer it up as a burnt offering." So Jephthah crossed over to the sons of Ammon to fight against them, and the Lord gave them into his hand. He struck them with a very great slaughter and help me out.
A roar.
A roar to the entrance of Minnith, 20 cities, and as far as
Abel Keramim.
So the sons of Ammon were subdued before the sons of Israel.
Now you see why I want Sam up here
I know.
reading these things. So yeah, it's like a spelling test almost, a vocabulary test.
There you go.
So again, we've already looked at some maps, but from Aroer to the entrance of it, it's areas right around there, kind of that central Jordan area of the Transjordan, of the east side of the Jordan, kind of that area that we've already looked at. So let's just jump right into the whole thing. I mean, this is, if you talk about Jephthah, and to people that have any sense of Bible knowledge or they've heard the story before, the thing about Jephthah is his vow, right? We can't have a discussion of the story of Jephthah without talking about the vow that he makes. And just right off the bat, what a weird vow to make. What a strange thing to say. God, if you get me through this battle, whatever walks out the door of my house first, I will offer it to you as a burnt offering. I don't understand that vow. I don't understand the reason you would make that vow. I don't understand how that signifies to God any sense of dependence upon him or any sense of adhering to his righteous sovereignty or any of those things. I don't understand why the vow is made in the first place. And we could go down silly routes, which maybe there was somebody he was hoping would walk out that door. I don't think that's it. That's a silly way to think of it. But even then, it doesn't make sense, because why would God, if that was a motive of his heart, like if that actually was a motive, maybe it'll be that servant I don't like, or maybe it'll be, the missus or whatever. God would not honor that. God would not honor that as a motive of his heart to bring about the destruction of somebody because he was hoping that he would see them first. And so it seems to me just a strange vow to make in the first place, and I don't understand Jephthah's reasoning for making it. And it's unnecessary. It's completely unnecessary. Look at the first, what does the very first thing of that part of the reading say? Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah. Jephthah was blessed by God. Jephthah was given the power and the strength of the Spirit to be able to go into battle against God's enemies. And I don't know in an Old Testament sense what that feels like. In the New Testament, I know when the Spirit came upon the disciples on the day of Pentecost, there was the sound, there was the visual aspect of that. And I don't know that in the Old Testament we can read that in there, that there was some visible manifestation of the Spirit where the people around knew there was a change over Jephthah or whatever. But it would seem to me that Jephthah would have some knowledge or indication of there being some assurity or some sense of purpose in what he was doing, and to know that God was on his side. God, it doesn't seem to me, sneaks around and does things, you know, in a backhanded way or in a silent way in these Old Testament stories. So after he's already got the Spirit of the Lord, God has already placed a stamp of approval upon what Jephthah's doing, for then Jephthah to say, if you give me the victory, I will give you this, seems totally unnecessary to me, seems extraneous. It's not the same as when Gideon was being called by God and really did not have that relationship with God up front, or did not have that knowledge of the Spirit being given to him up front, when Gideon kind of makes some of his requests of God to show me a sign. But still, Gideon's signs were they were benign. Nobody, they weren't offering somebody to be hurt or abused in some way. And so there's all kinds of questions that I have about why this vow is made and why it's worded the way he words it, and all of those things that I don't know we can answer appropriately. I think there's some questions that will always abound about this story and how it plays out. And number one on the list of questions for me is, why did he do it? I just don't even understand. I don't understand why he made the vow. And so Sam kind of goes along those lines too with his comments. He makes a vow rather than asking for a sign. Gideon didn't say, if you show me the fleece, then I will do this. He asked for the sign of the fleece. He didn't say, he didn't make it an if-then thing. He just asked for a sign. And so why, if you're going to ask for a sign, okay, but don't make it a vow. Don't make it an if-then thing where now you have to deliver on something. And then there is a decisive military victory. Boy, there's no question left. We know whose side God is on in this scenario. We know how it plays out, that God has placed a stamp of approval upon Jephthah as the leader of the people, that they have won the victory through Jephthah's leadership and his military leadership. So God has given them the victory. So when you go back to the beginning of the story, when Jephthah kind of makes some conditions on his employment, so to speak, those conditions are met, and now he has that position. Now he has that ability to lead the people because he's proven himself and he has demonstrated that God is with him. So in that sense, it's good, but now we got this vow to deal with. So the vow itself. And we'll get into that here in just a moment. I don't think we're going to get saved by the bell. I think we're going to have this talk next. Okay. We got to go. All right, we got to do this part because now Jephthah comes home. So verses 34 to 40.
All right, verse 34. When Jephthah came to his house at Mizpah, behold, his daughter was coming out to meet him with tambourines and with dancing. Now she was his one and only child. Besides her, he had no son or daughter. When he saw her, he tore his clothes and said, Alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low, and you are among those who trouble me. For I have given my word to the Lord that I cannot take it back. So she said to him, My father, you have given your word to the Lord. Do to me as you have said, since the Lord has avenged you of your enemies, the sons of Ammon. She said to her father, Let this thing be done for me. Let me alone 2 months, that I may go to the mountains and weep because of my virginity, I and my companions. Then he said, Go. So he sent her away for 2 months, and she left with her companions and wept on the mountains because of her virginity. At the end of the 2 months, she returned to her father, who did to her according to the vow which he had made, and she had no relations with the man. Thus it became a custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went yearly to commemorate the daughter of Jephthah, the Gileadite, for 4 days in the year.
Okay. So here we go. Ecclesiastes chapter 5. We need to read this one. Ecclesiastes 5, verses 4 through 7. Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. There it is. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verses 4 through 7. So in the words of the wise King Solomon, verse 4, when you make a vow to God, do not be late in paying it, for he takes no delight in fools. Pay what you vow. It is better that you should not vow than that you should vow and do not pay. Do not let your speech cause you to sin. Do not say in the presence of the messenger of God that it was a mistake. Why should God be angry on account of your voice and destroy the work of your hands? For in many dreams and in many words there is emptiness. Rather, fear God. So, what is God's stance? What is his position on keeping vows that we make? He's pretty set on it. He's pretty set on us keeping our vows, especially vows that are made to him or vows that invoke his name. So Jephthah's vow in particular was not just a vow, not just a general statement of, you know, if this, then I'll do this, but a specific vow to God that if you do this, if you give me this battle, then I will do this to honor the fact that you have given me the victory in this battle. So Jephthah makes a vow to God. So we can't go back on that. We have to keep the vow. We have to. Because there's no talking your way out of it to God. There's no explaining to God, I didn't mean to say it, or I didn't really mean it. By the way, I think we need to be careful about those things, because I think we use some pretty vow-like language pretty flippantly sometimes in our vernacular in our modern culture. I swear it's true. I promise you this, all right? We make those kind of statements kind of offhandedly often. And I think we need to be careful about those things. Jesus said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. We it shouldn't require a vow, first of all, for anybody to believe that you're telling the truth. If you tell somebody you're going to do something, just saying you're going to do it should mean you're going to do it. You shouldn't have to add a vow to it to make it mean something. So we need to be careful about that kind of language, because God expects us to honor our vows when we make one, especially when we invoke his name. So the question then, and I was going to let Sam riff here for a little while because I'm not. So did Jephthah keep his vow? Yes, Jephthah kept his vow. Now, what does that mean? What did Jephthah do to keep his vow? We got some problems here, because what did he vow that he was going to do?
Offer a burnt sacrifice.
He says, I'm going to, he says the words burnt sacrifice, right? Burnt offering.
Burnt offering.
And so he says those, let's see, since I'll see, verse 31, it shall be the Lord's, and I will offer it up as a burnt offering. That seems pretty specific. But then we've got some conflicts here. What does Leviticus 20 forbid? Human sacrifice. Is there any account, and I know what you're going to say, is there any account of God ever demanding human sacrifice? Well, you got Abraham and Isaac, but did God allow that sacrifice to happen? He stayed Abraham's hand. He knew that Abraham was going to follow through. He knew Abraham was going to do it, and he counted that as righteousness. He accepted that as having happened because of the intent of Abraham's heart, but he didn't let Abraham sacrifice his son. Okay? So I think that's an important point for us to make. How God was testing Abraham, and he wanted to see if Abraham would do it, but he didn't let him do it. Why didn't he let him do it? Because we don't serve a God who wants us to sacrifice humans. Human sacrifice is off the table. We don't do that, and we certainly don't do it in his name. We don't do it. So how does Jephthah honor this vow and still honor the law? Still honor a law that God demands be honored? Greg,
You know where I'm going.
I know where you're going.
10, verse 31, where it says, will be the Lord's, and I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering. There are some Hebrew scholars that says that could be translated for.
Okay.
And there's, there's debate on whether that in the Hebrew is most often translated and, but it can be translated or. And if that's the case, then it could be, this will be dedicated to the Lord, or if some animal walks out, we're going to sacrifice it to the Lord. And I favor that for this reason. As it goes on, he's talking about her virginity, that she was going to marry, not that she was going to die.
Yeah.
It seems to me that she was dedicated to God. But you can argue either way.
Yeah. So, I think you're onto something there. There are some, I'm barely an English speaker, let alone Hebrew, not at all. But my understanding of people that study the Hebrew and understand it, that there is a plausible way of writing it so that you could make it or offer as a sacrifice instead of saying and offers a sacrifice, although it's not the natural way. It would be an awkward way of wording it, but it could mean that. And so I wonder too, and I don't know the Hebrew behind it, but the idea of offering it as a burnt offering, I would offer it in the way that I would offer a burnt offering, fully and completely and totally and wholly, as an offering, in the same way that I would offer up something that I was offering as a burnt offering. Would be a way that we could render it in English that isn't necessarily the typical way we would use the word as, but it could be used that way. So it's kind of the same way in the Hebrew. Leviticus 27, Sam mentions here in his notes, some commentators believe that Leviticus 27 gave Jephthah a way out, where it talks of consecrating something instead of doing it as a burnt offering. You just offer it as a consecrated offering. And there's some examples there of things where I can't afford every year to go and offer my only cow that I have as an offering, but I can consecrate it. I can say it's the Lord's, even though I still kind of need it to survive, and I can say it's God's, but I still get to have it. And so, kind of along those lines. And I think there's that required a kind of an injunction from the priest to say, yeah, your offering fulfills your vow, or it fulfills your duty or your obligation. If you had a whole herd of stuff, you couldn't go tell the priest, I can't afford to give that one. The priest would say, yeah, you can. You're not off the hook. But if you were legitimately in need of being able to offer something in that way, then it was okay. So there may be a priestly dispensation to be able to say, yeah, you shouldn't have offered that vow, but we need to make it good to God somehow. So here's how we'll make it good. You now have to offer your daughter as a consecrated offering for service in the temple or tabernacle, and she now belongs to God in that way, and that I think is probably for me the safest reading of this as to how that happens. I have some when I was younger and I knew everything. I was way smarter back when I was younger. And I knew a lot more than I know now. I was certain that Jephthah laid her on an altar and killed her and burned her. I was just certain of it. And I am not so certain of that anymore. I have a problem with that reading of it. If you are certain that that's the way he fulfilled his vow, I'm not going to argue with you. I just think it raises some questions and some problems about a lot of things. So. I don't know. What do you think? Right? So, there's a couple of you, and this is just like a kind of a summary slide of like the and this is just kind of a compilation. So, of some typical views of this. View one is, and this is kind of a traditional view. I think if you go back and read old time commentators, they're kind of more fire and brimstone and like, this is the way it was and there's no way around it, versus maybe a more modern interpretation, which just saying those words makes me a little leery. But view number two, maybe a more modern interpretation of the story, where it's less likely that she was actually killed and was instead was offered in her virginity. So the idea of it being a burnt offering, it's a literal sacrifice. Judges 11:31. I mean, it's the words burnt offering mean what that sounds like. That's what it means. It means a burnt offering. Plain reading of the text, if you don't really know about the Bible and you don't really know about the law and you don't really know about God, it sounds like he offered his daughter as a burnt sacrifice. That's just kind of the plain reading of the text. Fits the tragic, rash vow narrative style. I mean, it kind of, if you want to make it a tragic story, this is kind of the way it needs to end. She needs to be paid as a vow. She is mourned annually, which I'm not sure that one fits necessarily with the idea of being a remembrance of death, but it was an annual remembrance. And then it is difficult. Jephthah in Hebrews 11, it would seem odd to add Jephthah as one of those heroes of faith in Hebrews chapter 11 if he killed his daughter. I mean, some of those guys, Samson was kind of a scoundrel and he makes it into Hebrews chapter 11, but so I'm not sure that's particularly persuasive, but it kind of works. The idea of it being a perpetual virginity, that she was just offered as consecrated to the Lord, and that she served in the temple in some way, or the tabernacle, I guess. That reading of or instead of and. It does seem that the emphasis of her mourning period for 2 months with her friends, and then the remembrance seems to be surround the idea of her virginity, that she was never given in marriage, not that she was killed. So it seems to be that because they were mourning her virginity and that she never got to be a mother, more so than that they killed her. That seems to be what it goes with. That it fits the Mosaic law. You can't sacrifice humans. Leviticus 18:21. Can't do it. So that works. And then the annual remembrance honors her dedication. And also it seems that, especially during her lifetime, when her friends went for 4 days and spent 4 days maybe with her as an annual remembrance, kind of fits. So the idea that they started that where they would kind of go and be with her for those 4 days. And then, so there you go. I don't know. It's kind of up to you. I'm not going to tell you what to think about it. I know I struggle with the idea of thinking that he offered her as a burnt offering, but maybe he did. Maybe he did. That's all I got. We'll do chapter 12 next week. It'll be less controversial. Hey, thanks for stepping up here, man.
Yeah, you bet.
Sure appreciate it.
So let me ask you this.